My dad had a national distributor of plumbing supplies. He was selling direct to plumbing contractors, and he was a sales man. I mean, that's where he grew up, selling on the road all the time, and then he eventually bought out his siblings and took over the ownership and leadership of the company. And he was also a preacher by nature. He just owned the conversation, especially at our dinner table. He would come home and he would preach off his soapbox, whatever was going on. And mostly it was around what was going on in the business that day. And he would just preach. And it was great. Sometimes I got bored with it, but really he was offering a business education.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Billy Hodes. Billy's father owned a national plumbing supply distribution business, and he worked alongside his brothers at the family business. After attending college at Mobile, Alabama, he started working for one of his brothers. Then he bought the company from him. After 12 years, he merged his company with another brother's company. And in 2018, he partnered with private equity and fully exited the business in 2023. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Billy.
Billy, welcome to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Excited to have a good conversation with you today.
My friend and one of your best people, Mark Schaefer, introduced us. And I looked, we had so many connections in common on LinkedIn, but we had never met till we had coffee last month. So let's start with something fun though. You're well known. You have a big family, brothers and sisters, your own kids. What would people that know you even fairly well, Billy, be surprised about you? Is there anything out there?
Well, I've never been to a nude beach before.
That my one listener out there, that's Billy and I were having a conversation about nude beaches. So anyhow,
you know what I would say, probably, Jeff, that folks that know me well or fairly well, nothing would surprise them about me. That's what I would probably say.
Yeah. What you see is what you get with Billy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
Now, I will say, when people call you like Billy or Jimmy, you're a real person. You're real, you're down to earth, like if you went by William or like if I went by Jeffrey, you're thinking, I'm not sure of this person. I don't know. That's just my New York Italian coming out in me, I think. But,
I'm named after both of my parents. I'm William Madden. Madden is my mom's maiden name.
Okay, nice.
And I'm named similarly. My dad was named the same, William Dirks. His mom's maiden name was Dirks. And then my son is William Ford. My wife's maiden name is Ford. And so my dad likes to reference my son. God bless him. He's passed now, but he used to call, he was the first, I was the second, and he called my son Billy the Turd. But funny story, my son, Billy, when he was, coming in at age, he was, 6th or 7th or 8th grade. And we're getting phone calls, on the house phone still back then. And my son said, Dad, everybody's calling for Billy. And, they don't know if it's you or me. He's like, maybe it's time you go by Bill. And I said, that'll never happen. I'm Billy. I always have been. I always will be. But feel free if you want to change your name to Bill, go right ahead. But I'm Billy.
Wow.
Always have been, always will be.
Wow, power move. Nice. Yeah, so you were born and raised in Kansas City, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Right here, just
Uh,
south of the plaza, born and raised. Yeah.
yeah, nice. What was fun for you growing up? I know you had a lot of siblings, but what you love doing?
I loved, I was blessed. I'm the youngest of 11 children. So blessed to have, just right there in my home, everything I could ask for. The last five of us were boys. So I like to say I was physically and mentally abused throughout my childhood, but in a good way. I look back on it now, and it molded me and galvanized me into the guy I am. So truly a blessing. But I had a great upbringing, great parents, great structure, very faith based. I'm a Catholic, and we had a very strong upbringing, high expectations. My dad always used to say, "To whom much is given, much is expected,"
Yeah,
and so I've tried to live up to, giving back to and giving back to the world because I've been a blessed guy, and so
yeah,
that's a big expectation of all the
yeah.
blessings I've received.
Yeah, 11 siblings or 10 siblings and you, that's is the opposite for me. It was just me and my brother, and he's 10 and a half years older than I am. So I got the shit kicked out of me a lot because it's hard when you're 10 years old to beat up a 20-year-old. It's just,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and that was in New York, right, Jeff?
yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when he bring me to, a doctor's appointment. I hurt my knee in football. He brought me to a doctor appointment. And every time we would get in an elevator, we were the only ones in there. He ring the boxing bell, ding ding, and he started boxing with me. Yeah, you're 13. It's hard to win in that
Right.
that was the steel cage
Right.
match before they had steel cage matches. I, I was just hoping we were going to the third floor, not the 40th, in the doctor's office.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
I've interviewed, I don't know how many people on the podcast, 200 plus now, and you have at 18, you had the greatest strategy I've ever heard. Just well ahead of your years, a strategy to pick a college. So just walk me and the audience through your thought process there, Billy.
Wow, that's a funny story. Yeah, so I went to Rockhurst High School, Jesuit high school, class of 92. And back then, the Jesuits said, okay, we've got Jesuit college night coming in next week, and it's a requirement. You got to check in and you got to stay there for the whole 2 hours. I was more of a student of the social life than I was a student of the books. I went and, you look down the aisle and there's probably 20, 25 schools there, and 24 of them had priests in collars and their flyers out in front looking to talk about their college. But I looked about halfway down the aisle and I saw this brilliant school called Spring Hill College. They had two beautiful blondes with Southern accents that had just graduated, and they were there to talk about Spring Hill. So I spent the better part of 2 hours learning as much as I could about Spring Hill College as possible. And they were very nice, lovely girls. I felt like there was still more to learn, so I invited them to Charlie Hooper's for the Wednesday night import night afterwards, and got to know more about Spring Hill. And yeah, the next morning my dad was curious, how did it go? What'd you learn? And I said, I know where I want to go to school next year. I want to go to Spring Hill College. And so that's
Yeah.
how it went.
Love it. And that was the day Charlie Hooper's is a kind of iconic bar in Kansas City, and I used to go to Charlie Hooper's myself. I remember the import beer nights when they were $1 a import beer on those Wednesday nights. So I don't know what the price point was when you were going, but
Yeah, something
was
similar.
it was
to
a
that,
great
not too
deal.
far. Yeah,
It was a
yeah.
great deal for sure. And they have the best hot dogs on Saturdays.
Oh,
Also at Hooper's.
Chihuahua's my favorite.
Yeah, there you go. Might turn this into a food show, people out there. Yeah, so you go to Spring Hill and Mobile, Alabama. Did get a little bit of a southern accent, I'm sure. So you graduate.
Talk about your degree. I mean, it looks like you had a BS in sociology, psychology, and philosophy. I mean, it sounds like you were even at that a deep thinker. What was the impetus behind those majors?
Well, yeah, you could say that. I am, like I said, more of a student of life and of people than I was of the books. So after a year of study, I knew I wanted to live in the business world, and so I was studying business, finance, and marketing. And let's just say I wasn't excelling on the academic side, and so after reviewing my grades, my dad said, "Billy, what's going on here?" And I said, Dad, business in the classroom is a lot different than the real world. I've been learning about business from you all these years around the dinner table, and I don't know if these guys know what they're talking about in there, and it's just not very interesting. And so I'm not very engaged. And he goes, "Well, what classes do you like?" And I said, I love my psychology class. I love my philosophy class and my sociology class. He's like, "Well, study what you like. Engage in what you're in your classes. Study what you like. Use that degree to your best ability when you get out of college." And
Yeah,
so I took his advice. That's what I did. Spring Hill College it's a Jesuit school, liberal arts school, and so when I got to getting into signing up for my classes for senior year, I realized because of all the curriculum, the liberal arts curriculum they require you to take. I was a sociology major, but I was, a class or two from getting a minor in both philosophy and psychology. So I took a few more classes and added those minors. So yeah, it was a
yeah,
great time. It was a great school, small, so I knew just about everybody, but big enough where I was still, meeting new people as I was on my way out. But yeah,
yeah.
that's where I met my wife Mara. She is grew up in a small town on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay called Fairhope, Alabama. And she's from a big family. She's seventh of eight kids, and so I spent a lot of time over there in Fairhope at their bay house with her and her family, and we ended up getting married and spending a few years there living in Fairhope before we made our way back to Kansas City.
Yeah, talk about your. I know your father owned a national plumbing supply distribution company, and I've had Bill Brandmeier on the podcast, and that whole family built Anturia, sold to Cardinal Health, and he said, every family gathering, because the whole family worked in the business. We talked, and when they sold and they all exited the day of the sale or the next day, they were, they didn't have to continue on. They said we didn't know what to talk about. So talk about, how you, because I get it, because I taught and this is nothing against the University of Kansas, but I'm teaching a sales leadership class. Some of the students didn't even take the like the sales 101 class. So it's hard to teach sales leadership if they're not, know the fundamentals of sales. But talk about your upbringing and just all the knowledge I'm sure you gained just through family, discussions.
Yeah, so my dad had like you said, a national distributor of plumbing supplies. He was selling direct to plumbing contractors, and he was a sales man. I mean, that's where he grew up selling on the road all the time, and then he eventually bought out his siblings and took over the ownership and leadership of the company. And he was also a preacher by nature. He just owned the conversation, especially at our dinner table. He would come home and he would preach off his soapbox, whatever was going on. And mostly it was around what was going on in the business that day. And he would just preach. And it was great. Sometimes I got bored with it, but really he was offering a business education. Is what I got right there around the dinner
Right.
table. And then my parents had seven boys and four girls. And so my dad, he had the idea that he wanted to provide the opportunity to his children, for anybody interested, the opportunity to start and own their own business. And so what he did was he said, "Hey, after you're done with your education, go out and work in the real world for 3 or 4 years doing something else. But if you're interested, the opportunity he had was you got a desk and a telephone. You take a piece of that catalog, one of the product lines, and buy it better and find another market to sell it to. And so that was his opportunity. So my older brothers, they took him up on that. One of my brothers, Nick, he started Midland Metal, and he did that in the mid 80s, and it really grew. It really took off. So by the time I was coming out of college and looking to move back from Alabama, he had so much opportunity, so much going on that he said, "Hey, look, instead of you starting from scratch and doing Dad's deal opportunity there," he said, I've got more opportunity than I can manage here. Why don't you come work for me?" And my brother Vince had already taken him up on that opportunity a few years earlier. And so we went and contributed to the growth of his company. There's so much opportunity. So that's what I did. I came back and worked on the plumbing and water well, irrigation, oil and gas side of Midland Metal, and eventually bought those markets from him a few years later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Midland Metal, but talk about how you got out of college. How'd you get your first job, and what was it? It looked like you were in Fairhope, but I'm not sure.
I started selling for my brother Joe had bought Hodes company from my dad when I was in college. So my dad had retired actually before I got started in business. Actually, let me go back because when I was in high school, I worked for my dad. After school, I would work from 3 to 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And I would come into the office and be the order taker from all of his sales guys who had been out on the road all day. I would go in, sit at the desk in front of the computer, wait for the phone calls from his sales reps, and they would recite the orders, 25 of this part number, 50, 100 of this part number. And so I'd enter those orders into the computer. And so my dad warned me. He said, "Look, this guy, Lee Hiller, who was a great guy, a number one producer. He was out of the Chicagoland area. After a long day on the road working with plumbers, he was not always the nicest guy." And so my dad said, "Listen, he is my number one producer. You just serve him and take his orders. And if he gives you a hard time, you just take it, swallow your pride, and get him taken care of." And I said, "Okay, got that." And so after doing this for a couple years, I established a pretty good relationship with Lee. And I always recognized and remembered my dad saying, it's my top producer. Don't go messing this up." This one evening, Lee was having a bad day and a bad night, and I apparently was not having the best day either. So as he's giving me the cadence of his orders, I said, "Hey, slow down," and he got impatient with me. "Come on, what are you doing? I got things to do." And so I gave him a little talk back, and said, "Lee, hey." And so we got into a fight, and I hung up on him. Didn't finish his orders for the night. And so I saw the writing on the wall. I knew what that meant. But the next day after school, I showed up to work, and my dad said, "You're done. You're done here. You're fired. You did not take care of Lee last night, and he was upset with you." And so that was the last day I ever worked for my father.
Wow.
He fired me, and I was gone. But then eventually my brother Joe, I was in college, bought the business from my dad. And so I was selling for my brother Joe for Hodes Company down. I covered, while I was still in school, I was taking classes in the morning, and then the afternoon I was selling to plumbers there in the Mobile area. So Hodes Company. So after graduation, I took over the territory of Alabama, the state of Alabama, the state of Mississippi, and the Panhandle of Florida. So I had a 4-week route that I was running through and selling to plumbing contractors, maintenance guys at hospitals and universities and prisons and resorts. So I did that for a few years down there. And then I ended up coming back to Kansas City working for my brother Joe at Hodes Company. But going around and hiring and training new sales reps around the country. I eventually made my way up to Chicago to work with Lee Hiller. And we
Oh,
had a
wow.
mutual customer that I worked with. We went on this fishing trip and I shared a cabin with Lee. So we had a lot of laughs about him getting me fired from my dad. And eventually, he was a great guy. We worked together professionally for a few years before
Yeah.
I ended up leaving Hodes Company and moving on.
Just either a hypothetical or if it actually happened, if your son or daughter worked for you in a similar role and the number one producer got hung up on, would you have fired your son or daughter? Just
I don't think so.
hypothetically.
I think we would have
Okay.
used it as a learning opportunity. But hey,
Different generation.
that was the different generation. My dad
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
he was known for, it wasn't unusual for him to lose his temper and fire people on the spot. So it's just a different management style.
It's like the Glenn Ross movie with Alec Baldwin. Just sell. That's all. First
ABC,
prize is
always be closing.
first prize is a Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Second prize steak knives. Third prize you're fired.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
hit the bricks or you are going out. Okay. Anyhow, what were some of the great lessons you learned from your dad? I mean, it has to be a lot, or stories he told that still you remember years later that you heard at the dinner table.
The greatest lesson, the greatest gift that my dad gave me was a good work ethic. He taught me how to work hard, how to be persistent and grind. He taught me that at home. He taught me that at work. So no question. I mean, he modeled it. I mean, he modeled it. He was a very hard worker, but family and faith were always more important than work. And he modeled that too. I like to say our home was our domestic church. And he led that home, he led that domestic church with real grace and a strong faith. Although he was out on the road, Sunday through Thursday night every week, and he had a bunch of kids at home. He also was very involved with the Curcio, which was a men's retreat here in Kansas City, and so more weekends than not, he would come home on Thursday night and Saturday morning he was gone Saturdays and Sundays working that retreat. So he was very focused on his faith and not just for himself, but to share that gift and to bring others to Christ. And so he modeled hard work and business, but I would say that a better model for me was how to be a good family man and how to be a good man of faith.
Yeah, so talk about your experience, like when you're running. It looked like you bought the company from your brother, ran it by yourself for 12 years. What was some of the learnings there when you're actually in charge and you'd say, "Holy cow, I didn't know this was going to happen."
This was around 2000, so I was like 28 years old, and of course, at 28 years old, I was pretty sure I had it all figured out and I had all the answers. The company at the time, after we had, Midland, my brother Vince had spun off the industrial OEM side a couple years earlier. And so what that left was, we figured out the plumbing division, what I was managing was losing money. It was a distressed company. It was hemorrhaging cash and losing money. And it really needed a new business model for that market because it wasn't complemented by the other, industrial market, the other side of the business. And so we considered, Nick and I were, Nick really suggested maybe we should just shut this down and liquidate and find something else to do. But I saw an opportunity, and so I put a business model together, a business plan together, and went out and found some financing, and I bought it from him. But the model called for 2 years of implementing this new model, this new pricing structure, going more from like high volume, low price to higher price, a different piece of the market. And so it took me a couple years to execute and to implement and to get back to the black. So that was hard. That was stressful because I went out and borrowed a bunch of money. I had just had my fourth child. I was 28 years old, had a mortgage, and then had this distressed company with an additional debt on top of that, implementing this new business model. So I quickly learned that I did not have all the answers and I didn't know shit. I started looking to build an advisory board. I was looking for some folks to help me that had the experience and the business acumen to help me get out of this valley of death, is what I called it, into greener pastures. And so when I was looking around for folks to build this advisory board around, I met a guy by the name of Larry Hawks, who was a Vistage chair. So I ended up joining his Vistage group. And Larry was a great mentor of mine, and so were the other members of my Vistage group. And that was the catalyst to getting me out of that valley of death and into greener pastures. I really leaned into that group and leaned hard on them to help me. And I can say it made all the difference in the world and what would be my success. So I did that. I ran Midland Metal independently there until about 2015. And in 2015, my brother Vince and I, who had spun off the other industrial divisions of Midland, we decided, hey, we have sown our entrepreneurial oats. We have both found some success independently. Let's merge the companies back together, back where it all began. And Vince and I, we are good buddies, brothers and good friends. Our skills, we really complemented each other well. I was more the sales and marketing side. He was more the operations finance side. And so we really complemented each other well. And our companies then also complemented each other well. And so that merge, it was a successful merge. We did that in 2015, put the companies back together, and really worked really well together in doing that.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
Well, tell me, you were pretty young, and how did you find? I know Vistage has been around since I think 1957, 1958, so it's been around for a long time. But if you're in your late 20s, that's pretty mature to say, "Hey, I'm going to join Vistage." So, did you know about it, or just through research? How did you?
I didn't know anything about it. I was doing research, like I said, trying to find. The idea was I was going to find some individuals to build my own advisory board. Just focused on Midland and on me and helping me. And so as I was networking and asking and looking for the right people, that's when I met Larry Hawks. He was already leading a team. And so I just joined that peer advisory team there with this Vistage. Yeah.
Billy, talk about, so it's 2015. It looked like you ran the business, you and your brother, and then you got involved in you partnered with a private equity firm. Talk about that process and the why of it, and how it worked out.
We had a great small to medium sized, what I'd call a family business. We had a lot of our friends and family working in the business. We were probably about 50 million at that time, about 50 employees. Running a great business. We had some really good people. Our dad always taught us, surround yourself with people smarter than you and give them the opportunities to succeed. And wasn't the hardest thing to do, to find people smarter than us, but we did that. And we had a great team of people. And so we really leveraged technology and processes. We had a profit sharing bonus program. So we had little to no turnover. We just had a really solid business. We attracted some folks in the industry. So Church, a group out of Chicago, private equity, we weren't looking to do that. We were going to be a family-owned, generational family-owned business. But they came to us and said, hey, we're looking to get into the industrial distribution market. We've identified you and your management team as somebody we'd like to leverage and take over the platform and go out and acquire more businesses. And so we danced with them to learn more, and then decided, it's not for us. We're going to continue down this path. Thank you for reaching out, but we're not going to do that. And then they went out and they found another company in our industry, made the acquisition, and then about a year later, they came back to us and said, we think that you'd be a better company, a better management team to help lead this platform. And so we took the opportunity to negotiate a mutually great deal. And so in 2018, we sold 75% of the business to them and retained 25. And the idea was that we were going to leverage our management team, our platform, and then go out and buy other businesses in our market, either companies that complemented us. So they were either, similar product line selling to pieces of the market that we weren't, or folks that were in the same selling to the same piece of the market, a different product line than we were. So that's what we did. We went out and over the next 5 years acquired 9 other businesses, and really it was the same model that we had. We were interested in we weren't interested in really doing anything different than they were doing, as far as we weren't looking to take them over and cut out their overhead, and we wanted to be the succession plan for these folks that maybe didn't have a succession plan or didn't have a plan for over the next several years to grow. So we did that with 9 companies. We bought their 75% of them, and then gave them the opportunity, come on the platform, help us be part of our growth. And, in another 5 years, we're going to sell that. And so that 25% will hopefully be a bigger bite of the apple than the initial 75 was. And all in all, it went great. We brought on some great companies, some great people, and really complemented the business, built it out from Canada to, across North America. And so, yeah, in January 22, when Church said, okay, we've accomplished what we want to accomplish. We've grown. We're going to get ready. We're going to take you to market again, and we're going to sell again. And so at that point, Vince and I, we decided, hey, we're going to resign. We're going to get out of the way here, because we're not interested in the next piece of this business. And so we did. We resigned in 22 and brought on a new CEO and pretty much the same management team. And then we sold that again in November of 23 and exited the business at that point.
I assume it was your first time working with private equity. What were some of the big surprises during the process for you?
Wind Church, they are a great group of guys to work with. I mean, they gave us a lot of autonomy. They knew that the investment they were making in a great company had a lot of value, and they respected that and let us continue to build on that. They were great partners in that respect, and they just really knew the value and wanted to leverage our long history, our relationships in the market, and identifying the right companies to bring on to acquire and complement our current business. So they were a great partner and the right partner, because they really let us continue to invest in people and to invest in the market. But yeah, I learned a lot over those 5 years. We had an experience that otherwise we probably never would have had, to be able to go out and identify the companies in the market that we wanted to work with, the people we wanted to work with, kind of get to an LOI point, negotiate the bigger picture. And then we were able to hand that off to Wind Church and say, hey, we're going to work with these guys, here into the future. You do the negotiations, you get us through the due diligence, and after close, they would hand it back off to us and say, okay, roll them onto the platform and let's go.
Yeah.
So it was really a beautiful relationship that worked really well.
You also hear the kind of horror stories working with PE groups and what happens after the sale, after they take over. But if you had advice to give to business owners considering a PE play for their business, what types of advice would you give them?
In my opinion, I think it all comes down to people before and after the sale. Like, I would say our greatest asset that Vince and I built in Midland was our people, was our culture. And a lot of times when private equity comes in and buys, that's the first thing to go, and it's really doesn't it's nonsensical. It doesn't make good business sense to buy and pay for the value of a company that's really got a thriving culture, and that's where a lot of the success is born from, and then to discount that and tear it up. So we knew we at least had a good feeling that Winchurch valued that and respected that, and they did. And that was the difference, I think, with our success and some of the other horror stories you hear about. I think it comes down to valuing and respecting the culture and the people.
Yeah, it's so key. All the acquisitions I've been through, they really work when the culture is very similar, the people are similar. If not, it's a disaster.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ask people that went through the Sprint Nextel merger. Yeah, it was a little difficult for both companies. But so here it is. It's 2023. You're out of the business. You've been working your whole life. Strong work ethic. And like, what's that like now? Like, holy shit, what am I going to do now?
Yeah. Well, it had been such an intense, busy 5 years. I promised my wife, I said, I'm gonna give it a year. I'm not gonna commit to anything. We're just gonna spend time together. We're gonna travel, and for the most part, I did that through 2024. We did a lot of traveling. It was great.
And you stayed married. That's good.
Yeah, yeah, I stayed married. Yes, yes. But then I had somebody reach out and say, "Hey, business owners, I'm working on this. Can you help me with this project?" And so I was doing some, I don't know, I wouldn't call it consulting, but I would just say some business advisory, strategic work with. I had 3 different companies I was working with, and I realized that I loved doing that. That really filled my bucket. I loved working in business, solving problems, working with people, and helping strategically get them over the hump and to the next level. And so I knew that working in business one way or another was in my future. I was also investing, so I had some capital as a fruit of the sale, and so I was really interested in real estate. So I was making some real estate investments, doing a lot of due diligence, a lot of research, learning as much as I could. I was pleasantly surprised by how I could find somebody with some experience in the real estate world, reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm curious. Would you be interested in sharing with me this or that?" Whatever it was their focal point. I was pleasantly surprised at how many people, without knowing me, would get on the phone and have an hour or two conversation and just spill all of their experience and wins and losses, and
Wow.
just share that with me freely. It was great. It was really telling about people, and it wasn't braggadocious. It was just them sharing freely what their experience has been, and saying, "Hey, I know you're learning about this. Stay away from this or look into that." It
Yeah.
was great. So I did some of that. Met a couple of people. Jeff Kudlotz is a local partner of mine. We started a little business, Monte Cristo Homes, investing in residential homes. I met him through an investment we made together through Pacific Sands. And so that's served me well. I've learned a lot. He's really the expert in that market, and so I've been able to partner with him and learn a lot from him and his experience. I've made some investments in the senior living market. I've got a senior living home down in Punta Gorda, Florida, and one up in outside of Detroit, Michigan. I got a great partner, operating partner there who I've learned a lot from. So anyway, after doing some of that and placing some of my capital in some good strategic investments, I had more time. And so I started working as an advisor, I guess, with a few local companies and also spending a lot more time with my wife, with Mara, with my kids, and on my faith. I wanted to get back into some of the daily devotionals that I wanted to form in a greater way, and so getting back to daily mass and doing some of the things in my church that I wanted to do, and so I knew I love business, and really back to the model that my parents prepared for me in my life, showing me work ethic, and I love doing that and solving problems. But I also loved and respected my family and my relationship with God. So I was really
Yeah.
working on all three of those. And that's when, ironically enough, and as I'm praying for what's next, just kind of opening the invitation to the Holy Spirit. What is it? What's going to be next in my life? And kind of having an open mind and an open heart to that. That's when I was introduced to Dan Cooper with Acumen. And Dan came and told me all about Acumen, which was similar to Vistage, a peer group for business owners and CEOs. But the difference with Acumen is that it's faith-based, it's Christian-based. So it's business owners and leaders with Christian values, bringing those together and what they're doing every day in their business life. And that really resonated with me. I loved what was going on. I visited more with Dan and a couple of the other growth catalysts here in Kansas City invited me to participate in some of their council meetings. And so having the Vistage experience, I really knew the value that this brings to business owners and CEOs. Having the opportunity to bring my Christian values into that was really exciting for me. And
Yeah.
so that's when Dan invited me to join Acumen, to buy into it and to start my own team. And so September of this past year, September 25, I launched my team of 14. Yesterday was our 8th council meeting together. What I'm doing now is a growth catalyst, working with 14 business owners, being intimately involved with them in their business and their growth, but also in their family life and their business and their businesses and their families and their marriages, them as a whole person, right? In every aspect of their leadership and their life. It's been really fruitful. I love what I'm doing with
Yeah.
Acumen now. It really fills my bucket.
No, it's outstanding. So what? Yeah, so it's great that you had that success and it helped you immensely as a business owner being in Vistage, and now you're doing it with Acumen. So that has to make you a great, leader of a group. But besides the faith based kind of aspect of Acumen, what are some other big differences between Vistage and Acumen?
I think, there's good people all around, but when you're bringing your Christian values into the way you lead your business, into the way you nurture your people, there's a difference there, a more effective, a higher level of leadership. We call it KBIs, kingdom building initiatives, so it's not about the good, glorious dollar. It's not all about that. It's about putting good people in position to succeed and nurturing people, nurturing cultures, and doing business for a greater cause, for a greater reason. That's where I think the difference lies in Acumen leaders and other business leaders, that it's doing it for a greater purpose, for the greater glory of God, if you will, and not just for the bottom line.
Talk about, so after building the group, obviously you have to go find the people, and you've built it very quickly. You had to have 14 at this point. What are your big learnings in these meetings, and what are you where have you grown? Obviously, all your expertise and your experience, I'm sure helped immensely the 14. But how have you changed since starting it and having these meetings?
The value to the folks on my team is that a lot of times as a business owner, when you don't have a peer advisory group or you don't have a business coach, you sometimes feel alienated, like you're on an island by yourself. You're carrying debt, you're servicing debt, you're trying to make payroll, you're trying to decide where you're going to invest in the future of the business and grow. And a lot of times you don't have anybody to talk to about it. Sometimes you can't talk to your banker about it. Sometimes you can't talk to your spouse about it. You can't talk to your employees about it, so you're left with this kind of burden to figure things out on your own. I think the real value of this is to have a peer network, to have a team, 14 other people that you can confide and trust in, and bring your dirty laundry, bring your opportunities, bring your struggles to the table every month. To have, instead of one person on an island being burdened with that, you've got a team of 14 others that you can openly share and say, hey, I've got this opportunity or this struggle. I don't know how to figure it out. And to share the details and to have that kind of feedback with people that you truly trust, it's really powerful.
Billy, we're recording here in April of 2026. What's some exciting projects you're thinking about or going to work on the remainder of the year?
Well, for me personally, now that I've got this team launched, we're 8 months into it. I'm always challenging myself to just find more and more ways to bring value to my team, to bring value to my members. And so I only have so much experience, so what I'm focused on is finding the commonalities and the needs of my team and bringing in some third party resources, whether that be a fractional advisor on finances or an EOS resource or anything that my members are needing and can use. I'm kind of acting as the resource to go out and find the necessary and most qualified people in our network and bring them in and help contribute to their success.
Yeah, so I'd love people's advice, great leaders like yourself, Billy, for two groups of people. One's that recent college graduate or even now these days high school graduate. They're going to start their professional career. So the high school graduate is going to skip college and do something professionally. The person out of college obviously got their degree. So what kind of advice do you give them as they look for that first job and begin their career?
I would just say to look for the valued experiences. What's meaningful to you. A lot of times folks sacrifice meaningful ways to live their days with a job or a salary. A lot of people find themselves 40 years down the road after that, and they've lived kind of a meaningless career that didn't really feed their who they are and their heart. So I would first say, do some self-assessment and who are you? Who do you want to be? And what do you want to do? And find an opportunity to do that. Even if it's not making the most money right off the bat, but stay true to yourself and what you want to be in life and go that way. Find those experiences and those people. And then I'd also say surround yourself with good people, because you are who you surround yourself with. You are who you spend the most time with. And so be intentional about that and make sure that you are being true to yourself and to your future self and surround yourself with the opportunities and the people that can help you continue to become that person.
Yeah, I think it was Jim Rohn that said you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. So
That's
that's
right.
great advice. Yeah. If you can recall back when you were first responsible for a group of people on an org chart, so you're a first time manager, and what advice would you give yourself, back at that point in time in terms of being a great leader?
I would say that communication is really important. And it's really a foundation to other things like building trust and communicating the fact that you really care for your folks and their future and their success and their happiness. A lot of that can be lost in lack of communication, driving business initiatives or driving folks to perform. If you're not communicating on a level of care and trust, that can get lost. That can get lost. And if you're not operating with a foundation of trust, you're not really operating. You're not really excelling. To give myself some advice, 30 years ago would be to make sure that your people know how much you truly care about them and to communicate appropriately around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the caring about the team is utmost utmost importance, and obviously communication goes with that. So, Billy, thank you so much. I'm grateful that Mark introduced us, and more grateful that you took the time to spend on the corporate couch with me today. So thanks so much.
All right, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Billy started so good, he told me he'd never been to a nude beach. That was a great start to the episode. How he picked a college strategy. He went to a nice Jesuit high school here in Kansas City, Rockhurst, and they had Jesuit college night. I don't know how many, 20 colleges. They all had priests in their booths except for Spring Hill, University of Mobile, Alabama. But because they had two co-eds, very attractive co-eds, not only did he talk to them a lot at the booth, took them to a local famous bar establishment in Kansas City, Charlie Hooper's, for import beer night to continue the conversation. I thought that was great. Got fired by his dad.
His dad, man.
Dad owned the company because he hung up on the number one sales producer.
That was an amazing story. And that was a turn that I didn't see coming.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, very funny. And then
Dad says, "You're out of here."
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then he was the youngest of 11 kids, a good Catholic family, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then I love that when he called it the Valley of Death. He was 28. He had 4 kids, mortgage debt. He buys a company that's losing money. Mm-hmm. Joined the Vistage group here in Kansas City, kind of helped turn it around for him. He had one quote, something like, confidence gets you started, humility gets you through. Because he didn't know what he didn't know. He's in this family business. Like every night was a mini NBA class, or by his dad. They talked all about business and what that means.
And his dad would preach. His dad would preach to his family at the dinner table. Preaching business.
He also said, family business, a perk, it gets you a job. The family business reality is you get fired faster.
He proved that.
And then, he merges companies with his brother's company, and a PE group came to them. They said no, we're looking to sell. They buy another company, and this PE company came back to them. They sold, I think, selling 75% of the company to PE firm. They stayed on. They scaled the platform. They acquired 9 more companies. It was, just that whole story. And then he exited and, just kind of took time for himself and things like that. Went to daily mass type thing. And now he's a growth catalyst leader for Acumen, which is similar to Vistage. It's just a little more of a, focus shift. It's more purpose, significance, and faith-based.
Faith-based.
But definitely a faith-based leader. I just so enjoyed talking to Billy.
It was an amazing interview. I absolutely loved it. I love the story about going to Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama. I thought that was amazing, chasing a couple of blonde co-ed recruiters down to Mobile. And then what did he do? He met his wife down there in Mobile, Alabama, and stayed down there for a while, started working in the family business, and then moved back to Kansas City. While he was in Alabama, got a major in something, so he majored in, sociology, philosophy, and psychology, or something like that.
Yes.
Because he was interested in people. He was interested in the study of people, and those majors will get you there. So one of the things that he said, and he said this pretty early in his interview with you, I think, is study what you like.
Yes.
He was going to have to go to college to get a business-ish degree, but he was pretty much sure that he was going to be working in the family business. So study if you like working with people, then be a philosophy major. So that's what he did. I thought it was an amazing story. I loved listening to him. I loved talking to him. I loved his faith-based emphasis in just about everything. He was not shy about that at all. He said, one of the things I've wanted to do is to do more things with my faith. And and when he left the company and went out on his own and retired, he wanted to spend time with his wife, and he wanted to spend time with God. And I think that was great. I absolutely loved the entire interview. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's why Acumen's such a great fit for him. He has all that business knowledge and growth, how to scale companies. So I'm sure the people in his group are learning, every time they talk to him. So it's fantastic. Recently, he told me like a joke. One of those. A guy walks in the bar, somebody walks in the bar. Give me one of those.
I got a million of a guy walked into a bar jokes. So you want another one?
Sure.
Here's another one.
Absolutely.
A nun, a Baptist preacher, and a rabbi walked into the bar. And the bartender said, "What is this, some kind of joke?"
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.